Really, Mr. Miller? More stories about big battles and secret missions? It's pudding time. You're holding up the line, and frankly, nobody here believes those wild tales anymore. Crazy Frank, that's what they call you, you know. The sharp words came from Carla, a care assistant at the Serene Meadows nursing home. Her voice was loud enough for half the dining room to hear. Frank Miller, a man of 80-some years, with eyes that had seen too much and a body that had endured even more, simply flinched. He clutched the slightly worn, cheap plastic tray a little tighter. His hands, gnarled with age, trembled just a bit. He had been trying to tell young Timmy, a new volunteer, about a time in Korea, not for glory, but because Timmy had asked about his faded tattoo, a barely visible eagle under a parachute. Frank was a quiet man. Most days he sat by the window in his small room, looking out at a world that had largely forgotten him and men like him. He wore simple, clean clothes, often a faded flannel shirt and comfortable trousers. His silver hair was neatly combed, though a little thin on top. He didn't ask for much. A warm bed, 3 meals a day, and perhaps a moment of peace. The other residents mostly kept their distance. The Crazy Frank nickname, started by staff members like Carla, who, tired of his occasional mumbled recollections of intense moments from a past life, had stuck. They didn't see a hero. They saw an old man, perhaps a little confused, lost in memories that sounded too grand, too terrifying to be real. Today, he had hoped to share a small piece of that past. Not the scary parts, but the part about brotherhood. But Carla's voice cut through his attempt like a knife. If you believe our elders deserve to be heard, not mocked, type "listen" in the comments. Frank didn't argue. He just nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the linoleum floor. He shuffled forward in the pudding line. Carla wasn't new. She'd been at Serene Meadows for a few years. She had a way of making the residents feel small, especially those who didn't have frequent visitors or a strong voice to complain. She seemed to enjoy the little power she had. Honestly, Carla said, turning to another staff member, a smirk on her face, the things he comes up with, you'd think he single-handedly won every war ever fought. If he was such a big shot, what's he doing in a place like this, eh? Frank heard her. Every word felt like a tiny pebble hitting a raw wound. He took his small bowl of chocolate pudding and a plastic spoon and made his way to his usual table in the corner, the one that wobbled. He tried to eat, but the pudding tasted like ash in his mouth. He wasn't crazy. The memories were real. The faces of his comrades, the sound of gunfire, the freezing cold, the desperate courage, it was all seared into his soul. But how could he make them understand? He wasn't looking for praise, just a little human kindness, a little belief. He stayed calm. He faced far worse than a care assistant's scorn. He finished his pudding, cleaned his area meticulously, and slowly walked back to his room. Carla watched him go, then rolled her eyes at her colleague. See, off to dreamland again. Probably thinks he's getting a medal later. She laughed, a short, barking sound. Back in his room, Frank sat on the edge of his neatly made bed. The familiar ache of loneliness settled in. He was tired of being dismissed, of being invisible, of being Crazy Frank. He thought about just letting it go, like he always did. What was the point? But then, something shifted inside him, a spark of defiance, long dormant. He remembered a promise made decades ago by a young captain he'd pulled from a burning wreck under heavy fire. If you ever need anything, Sergeant Miller, anything at all, you call this number, day or night. He hadn't thought of that captain, now a very important man, in years. He'd never imagined he would use that number. It felt like asking for a handout, and Frank Miller wasn't one to ask for help. He reached for his old, worn leather wallet. Tucked behind a faded photo of a smiling young woman who had waited for him but had been gone for 20 years now was a small, creased business card. On it, a name and a private number, written in strong, confident ink. General Wallace. His fingers, though old, were surprisingly steady as he picked up the simple telephone on his bedside table. He dialed the number, his heart thumping a slow, heavy beat against his ribs. It rang twice. A crisp, official-sounding voice answered. Wallace. General Wallace? Frank's voice was quiet, a little raspy. This is Sergeant Frank Miller, from Korea, Chosin Reservoir. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Frank thought perhaps the general had forgotten or that he'd dialed a wrong number. Then, the voice came back, charged with an energy that crackled through the line. Sergeant Miller, Frank, is that really you? The formality was gone, replaced by a tone of shock and then unmistakable warmth and concern. Frank, my God, man, where are you? Are you all right? Frank simply explained where he was, and in a few brief, understated sentences, mentioned that things were difficult. He didn't complain much, just said he felt a bit disrespected. He didn't use the term Crazy Frank. Disrespected? General Wallace's voice turned hard as steel. Sergeant, you stay right where you are. I'm on my way, and I'm bringing friends. Frank hung up the phone. A strange sense of peace settled over him. He had done what he could. Now, he would wait. He didn't know what to expect, but a tiny part of him felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Have you ever made a call that changed everything? Type 1 call if you have. Less than 2 hours later, the quiet afternoon at Serene Meadows Nursing Home was shattered. It began with a distant sound of sirens, growing steadily closer. Then, a motorcade. Not just one or two cars, but a procession of gleaming black sedans and two olive-green military vehicles with official insignias pulled up to the entrance. Carla was at the front desk, filing her nails and gossiping with another aide, when she saw the flashing lights through the window. What in the world, she muttered, annoyed at the interruption. Doors opened, and out stepped men and women in immaculate military uniforms, their chests adorned with ribbons and medals. Several serious-looking civilians in dark suits accompanied them, carrying briefcases. They moved with purpose, their faces stern. Carla's jaw slowly dropped. The nail file clattered to the floor. She scrambled to her feet, trying to smooth her uniform, a sudden knot of dread tightening in her stomach. A tall, imposing man with 4 stars on his shoulders strode in, followed closely by a distinguished-looking civilian. This was General Wallace, his face a mask of grim determination. "We are here to see Sergeant Frank Miller," the general announced, his voice booming through the suddenly silent lobby. Other residents and staff had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion, their faces filled with curiosity and apprehension. Carla, flustered, stepped forward. "Sergeant Miller? Oh, you mean Frank? Crazy Frank?" She tried a dismissive little laugh, but it died in her throat under the general's icy glare. He's one of our residents. A bit confused, usually. Harmless, though." The civilian next to the general, a Mr. Henderson from the Department of Veterans Affairs, stepped forward. His voice was quiet but carried immense authority. "Ma'am, the man you so casually dismiss as Crazy Frank is Sergeant First Class Frank Miller, a recipient of the Medal of Honor for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." A collective gasp went through the onlookers. Carla's face went white. She looked like she might faint. The term Medal of Honor hung in the air, heavy and profound. The nursing home director, Mr. Abernathy, a man who usually spent his days in his office, came rushing out, his tie askew. "General Wallace, Mr. Henderson." What is the meaning of this? Is there a problem?" General Wallace looked straight at Director Abernathy. "The problem, Director," he said, his voice laced with cold anger, "is that one of this nation's greatest heroes, a man to whom we all owe an immeasurable debt, has been living in your facility, apparently subjected to mockery and neglect, and referred to by your staff as Crazy Frank." Director Abernathy looked horrified. He turned to Carla, his face crimson. "Is this true?" Carla stammered, it was just a nickname. He tells such stories." "Stories?" A younger colonel, his chest a rainbow of commendations, stepped forward holding a file. "Let me tell you about Sergeant Miller's stories. He held off an entire enemy platoon single-handedly for 6 hours on a frozen hill in Korea, saving his entire company. He crawled under machine gun fire to rescue his wounded captain. This captain," he gestured to General Wallace, "he led a bayonet charge against impossible odds. These aren't stories, ma'am. They are documented acts of almost unbelievable bravery." Tears welled in General Wallace's eyes as he looked towards the hallway where Frank's room was. "Frank Miller saved my life. He's a brother to me." Director Abernathy turned to Frank, who had been quietly brought out by a stunned but respectful aide. The director bowed his head. "Sergeant Miller, on behalf of Serene Meadows, and personally, I am so profoundly, deeply sorry. There are no words to express our shame and regret for how you've been treated. This is inexcusable." Mr. Henderson from the VA then explained their visit. Sergeant Miller, the president is holding a special ceremony next month at the White House to honor living Medal of Honor recipients. We've been trying to locate you for some time. We are here to make arrangements and to ensure you are treated with the dignity and honor you so richly deserve from this moment forward. Frank simply nodded, a small, tired smile gracing his lips. He looked at General Wallace, a silent understanding passing between them. The consequences for Carla were swift. Director Abernathy, his face a mixture of fury and embarrassment, addressed her directly. Your employment at Serene Meadows is terminated, effective immediately. Your conduct has been a disgrace to this institution and to the values of compassion and respect we are supposed to uphold. You will be escorted off the premises. Carla, pale and trembling, was led away, stripped of her badge. She finally understood. The old man she'd mocked wasn't crazy. He was a legend. If you believe true heroes walk among us, often unseen, type never forget. Director Abernathy immediately announced sweeping changes. We will be implementing mandatory new training for all staff on veteran sensitivity and the importance of treating every resident with the utmost respect. Sergeant Miller will be offered our finest suite, free of charge, for as long as he wishes to stay, with a dedicated care team. And his meals, he added with a pointed look around, will be whatever he desires. Frank, with quiet dignity, accepted their apologies. He didn't want a fancy suite, he said. His current room was fine, but he appreciated the sentiment. What he wanted most was just to be heard, to be treated like a human being. The committee members, along with General Wallace, spent the rest of the afternoon with Frank, not as officials, but as friends and admirers. They talked about old times, shared memories, and made plans for his trip to Washington. The other residents, now aware of who lived among them, watched in awe and a little shame for their own prior indifference. Some came by later, offering hesitant apologies and words of admiration. The story of Crazy Frank, the forgotten hero of Serene Meadows, spread like wildfire. The local news picked it up, then national outlets. The nursing home, under new scrutiny, made genuine efforts to improve. They even installed a small plaque in the lobby honoring Sergeant Frank Miller and all veterans. Frank attended the White House ceremony. He stood tall, though a little stooped with age, as the president recounted his bravery. He didn't do it for the applause, but for the men who didn't come home, for the memories he carried. He remained a humble man, but he was no longer invisible. He was no longer Crazy Frank. He was Sergeant Frank Miller, a hero, finally recognized. The most important lessons are often the simplest. Respect everyone, for you never know the battles they have fought or the silent heroism they carry within them. Don't judge a book by its cover, and always, always honor those who have sacrificed for others. If you believe in treating everyone with respect, please subscribe to our channel for more stories that uplift and inspire. Remember, kindness costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable.